So behind me is the Murrumbidgee River. This is as close as I could get to the location where Hume and Hovell crossed the Murrumbidgee. And roughly over that hill behind me is where Hume and Hovell crossed in 1824. This is where I am at Hume Park, and roughly here is where Hume and Hovell crossed over. It looks very different, I imagine, to what they would have seen. You can see the water levels must come up a lot higher for that wall to have been erected like that, and the ladders. These hills are very bare. Would have been very different. There would have been vegetation right up to the edge of the water. A large portion of this river flows through Wiradjuri country, and their name for it is Murrumbidgee. According to the murrumbidgee.com.au, the Murrumbidgee River is 1,485 kilometres long. It begins high in the Australian Alps and eventually meets up with the Murray, which is Milawa in Wiradjuri. The river doesn't have the same natural state as it did 200 years ago. Water that would have once ended up in the river is diverted for a number of purposes, including irrigating crops that we rely on in our modern society, such as rice, grains, fruits, vegetables, legumes and cotton. So it was the 19th of October in 1824 when Hume and Hovell arrived at the banks of the Murrumbidgee. Hovell noted in his journal that from all appearances it is the commencement of the spring season, the indication being the trees and young grass. So what I'm seeing today, 200 years later, is actually a very dry countryside. And I was listening to the local Landcare radio station and they were saying they haven't had any decent rain since autumn. Hovell continued, "At 1 p.m. the country became, to our astonishment, broken and irregular, and it was a considerable time before we could find a passage to descend with the carts. But at last we succeeded and found a much better road than we expected. At 3 o'clock we got to the bottom of the hills and arrived at the banks of the Murrumbidgee River, but found the river so very high, occasioned by the rain a few days back, that we were not able to pass." So on the 20th of October the waters were still rising, so they were considering what they would do. On Thursday the 21st of October, Hovell wrote, "Sent the people a-hunting, as we were not able to cross the river, nor had it, to our appearance, fallen since last night. The men returned, but with no success. The rivers in this quarter abound with excellent fish, the same as in the Lachlan and Fish rivers. They are equal to any fish I ever ate, either in this country or in England." Friday 22nd. As there was but little appearance of the river falling to any extent, we thought it advisable to try to pass the river by converting the body of one of the carts into a boat, by means of a tarpaulin put round the cart, leaving the top open, and by lines from side to side of the river to haul her backwards and forwards. In this plan we were fortunate enough to succeed, far beyond our expectations, and in about 8 or 9 turns we had everything across. By 3 p.m. the 3 horses and 5 bullocks were swum over, and by 5 o'clock everything was stowed away. Thus we did accomplish in a few hours, and without loss or injury, what we before thought impracticable. William Bland, in his book Journey of Discovery to Port Phillip, wrote a little more detail about this day. He wrote, "Mr. Hume and one of the men undertook the dangerous enterprise of swimming across the river, taking with them a small line of about 6 feet long, which they carried between their teeth. This was not done without great difficulty and some danger, both from the extreme rapidity of the current and the great pressure of the water on a length of line so considerable it was necessary for the purpose, the weight of the latter not only retarding the progress of the swimmers, but occasioning them to swim deeply, and at times dragging them almost under the water, and by which circumstance they were in fact swept down the river a considerable distance. They now conveyed one of the ends of their intended tow rope across the river, by means of the line. The bullocks and horses were now conducted across separately, some of the bullocks being in a state of almost complete submersion during the operation, and one of them becoming turned upon its back, and continuing in this position a considerable portion of the passage." Wow. So that was the Murrumbidgee, and I wanted to take this opportunity to shout out to the students of Tamblin Primary School who were kind enough to let me visit them the other day and show me their artwork. They've been studying Hume and Hovell, and they've created these beautiful artworks of their interpretation of Hume and Hovell and the 6 men they took with them crossing the Murrumbidgee River. What beautiful paintings. Also, it was a shame that I couldn't meet with the older students who were on camp, so I really hope you enjoyed your camp.